ever daydreamed about owning an island? You know, winning the lottery and just buying a whole island?
Oh, yeah.
Well, imagine having the resources of a whole country and using them to try and buy a massive island. Like Greenland.
Ambitious.
That's what we're diving into today.
Sounds fun.
The history of U.S. attempts to purchase Greenland.
Not just a one-time thing either.
Right.
We're going to be exploring a Wikipedia article
Okay.
detailing proposals that go all the way back to 1867.
Wow.
With attempts in 1910,
Uh-huh.
1946,
Okay.
and even more recently during President Trump's administration.
So get ready for a wild ride through history.
It's going to be a fascinating one.
Unpacking the motivations and the geopolitics
And the implication
of these pretty unusual real estate ambitions.
You know, to understand this, we need to start with Greenland itself.
Oh, okay.
Because it's not just some icy wasteland up there.
Right. It wasn't always linked to Denmark, was it?
You're right.
Yeah.
Norse settlements actually existed in southern Greenland as far back as the 1200s. Yeah, they eventually vanished.
Okay.
But Danish claims emerged in the 1500s, followed by missionaries and traders who recolonized the South in the 1700s.
But didn't the U.S. have a few explorers poking around up there, too?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
In the late 1800s and early 1900s,
Yeah.
you had figures like Charles Francis Hall and Robert Peary exploring and even claiming parts of Greenland for the U.S.
Interesting. So how did Denmark solidify its hold on the island?
It's actually a bit ironic.
Okay.
Think back to 1917 when the U.S. purchased the Danish West Indies,
Yeah.
which eventually became the U.S. Virgin Islands.
Right.
As part of that deal, Denmark insisted that the U.S. formally recognize Danish sovereignty over all of Greenland.
Hold on. The U.S., famous for the Monroe Doctrine opposing foreign expansion in the Americas, made an exception for Greenland.
It's true.
It makes you wonder why.
It really does.
Right.
Perhaps it shows that even with firmly stated principles, strategic interests can sometimes tip the scales
Interesting.
in foreign policy decisions.
Okay, so we've got this backdrop of competing interests in Greenland,
Uh-huh.
but then World War II arrives and kind of throws everything up in the air.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Suddenly, Greenland's proximity to North America made it incredibly valuable strategically.
Yeah, because of its location.
And it wasn't just about location either.
Oh, really?
Greenland also had cryolite, a mineral that's essential for aluminum production,
Okay.
which was crucial for wartime manufacturing.
So I'm guessing the U.S. took action?
You bet they did.
Yeah.
The U.S. occupied Greenland throughout World War II.
Wow.
And in 1946, the Joint Chiefs of Staff even declared it a critical location for U.S. bases.
So this wasn't just a passing wartime interest?
No, it wasn't.
Yeah.
It reflected a deeper understanding of Greenland's strategic importance.
Especially with the Cold War coming up.
Precisely.
Yeah.
And that's when things get even more interesting.
Okay.
A treaty in 1951 granted the U.S. exclusive defense jurisdiction over Greenland.
So basically the U.S. had control over Greenland during the Cold War, even though it wasn't officially theirs.
You could say that, yeah.
That's quite a twist. So let's talk about those attempts to buy Greenland outright. What are the details? Where do we even begin?
Let's rewind all the way back to 1867.
Okay.
Remember, William Seward, the Secretary of State, who orchestrated the Alaska Purchase?
Yeah, the guy who bought Alaska for what many considered a steal.
Well, he was also seriously considering buying Greenland.
Really?
And get this, Iceland, too.
The U.S. owning both Greenland and Iceland. Can you imagine?
Right.
What would the geopolitical landscape even look like?
It's crazy to think about.
Yeah.
They were actually quite close to striking a deal.
Wow.
But in the end, no formal offer was made.
But that wasn't the end of it.
Oh, no, not at all.
Okay.
Fast forward to 1910, and things get even more interesting.
Okay, this is where it gets even crazier, right?
Oh, yeah.
Like a geopolitical game of musical chairs?
That's a good way to put it.
So tell me more.
There was this incredibly elaborate trade proposal. The U.S. wanted to swap Mindanao and Palawan and the Philippines for Greenland and the Danish West Indies.
Oh, okay.
Then Denmark would turn around and trade those islands to Germany in exchange for northern Schleswig.
Wow, that's a lot of moving pieces. So did this crazy plan actually work out?
Not quite.
Mm.
In the end, Denmark managed to regain northern Schleswig after World War I
Okay.
without having to go through with that complex swap.
But the story doesn't end there, right?
No.
Okay.
In 1946, the U.S. made an offer that shocked the Danish government.
The $100 million in gold offer.
That's the one.
Yeah.
The Danish foreign minister was completely taken aback by the proposal.
And I bet there was a lot going on behind the scenes.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
There was a lot of diplomatic maneuvering and tension, particularly with Henrik Kaufmann,
Okay.
the Danish ambassador to the U.S. at the time,
Yeah.
who was advocating for a strong U.S. presence in Greenland while keeping the Danish government somewhat in the dark.
That sounds like a spy movie.
A little bit.
So why did Denmark ultimately refuse to sell? Was it purely national pride, or was there something more to it?
It's a tough question.
Yeah.
It makes you think about more than just the money,
Right.
like their identity,
Exact.
history,
Ah.
responsibility towards the Greenlandic people.
Greenland holds a special place in Danish history and culture. You think about their Viking heritage,
Yeah.
the exploration of the Arctic, the unique relationship with the Inuit population.
Yeah, it's not just about the bottom line.
Exactly.
And it's not like the U.S. just gave up after 1946.
Whoop.
Fast forward to 2019.
Things get interesting again.
President Trump throws Greenland back into the spotlight.
It's a fascinating twist.
It really shows that Greenland is still important today,
For sure.
even in the 21st century.
Trump expressing interest in buying Greenland,
Yeah.
it felt like a movie.
It did.
Everyone was like, is he serious?
But that was the reaction from a lot of people.
Yeah.
Disbelief, outrage from
Yeah.
Greenland, from Denmark, from the international community.
The idea of one country just buying another?
It's not something you hear every day,
No.
especially in the modern era.
And then there's the whole thing with Trump canceling a state visit to Denmark
Oh,
after they refused to sell.
what a mesh. How
Right.
did that all play out?
It was a major diplomatic faux pas, to
Yeah.
say the least.
Who was?
The cancellation was announced on Twitter.
Oh, wow.
Totally blindsided the Danish government.
I can imagine.
They had to scramble
Yeah.
to reassure the U.S. that they were still allies.
Especially about the Arctic.
Right.
So looking back, what do you think were Trump's real motivations?
It's hard to say for sure.
Was it about resources or national security?
Maybe.
Countering China's growing influence in the Arctic.
Could be a mix of all of those things.
Yeah.
It wasn't just about Trump's personal whims, though.
Okay.
The timing of his interest coincided with a growing awareness
Uh-huh.
of the Arctic's strategic importance.
Yeah.
Especially with climate change and China's increasing activities in the region. Speaking of China, they've been pretty active in the Arctic.
They have.
Yeah.
China has been investing heavily in Greenland in recent years,
What are they doing?
focusing on mining and infrastructure projects.
So they're looking for access to resources.
And they're also interested in establishing a strategic foothold
Okay.
in the Arctic as the region becomes more accessible because of melting ice.
So where does Greenland stand today? What does its future look like?
Well, Greenland is currently an autonomous territory
Uh-huh.
within the Kingdom of Denmark,
Right.
but there's a growing movement for full independence.
Okay.
The outcome of that movement will have a big impact
Yeah.
on the relationship between the U.S., Greenland, and Denmark.
And I'm guessing China's ambitions add another layer of complexity to all of this.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
China's involvement in Greenland can't be ignored.
Right.
It's changing the geopolitical landscape of the Arctic.
Yeah.
It's something that both the U.S. and Denmark are watching closely.
So let's do a little thought experiment. What would be the benefits and drawbacks if Greenland actually became a U.S. territory?
That's a tough one.
Yeah.
There are a lot of potential answers.
Well, from the U.S. perspective,
Yeah.
gaining a territory with Greenland's strategic location and resources
Right.
would be a big win.
For sure. Think about the rare earth minerals found there,
Uh-huh.
which are crucial for technologies and defense industries.
Yeah.
And of course, having Greenland as part of the U.S.
Yeah.
would allow them to directly counter China's growing influence in the region.
But wouldn't there be some downsides, too?
Definitely.
Integrating Greenland into the U.S. would be a big challenge.
From a political standpoint
Yeah.
and a logistical
That
one,
would be a massive undertaking.
there would be cultural differences to navigate,
Right.
infrastructure to develop,
Yeah.
not to mention potential environmental concerns.
About resource extraction.
Exactly. It's not a simple decision.
And we can't forget about the people who actually live in Greenland.
That's so important.
What are their hopes and aspirations for the future?
It's easy to get caught up in the geopolitics
Yeah.
and forget about the people.
And what they want.
Many Greenlanders see independence as the best path
Okay.
towards self-determination and control over their own destiny.
They want to be in charge of their own future.
Exactly. They don't want to be pawns in a game
Right.
between global superpowers.
They want to make their own choices.
Right.
It's a perspective we need to keep in mind
Absolutely.
when we think about Greenland's future. So with all these moving pieces, could we actually see Greenland become part of the U.S.?
It's tough to say for sure.
Or is it more likely to become independent?
There are so many factors at play.
Yeah.
The situation is always changing.
It feels like we're at a turning point.
For Greenland
Yeah.
and for the entire Arctic region.
You're right. The Arctic is becoming more and more important globally with
Right.
climate change, opening up new shipping routes, and making resources more accessible.
It's attracting attention from everywhere.
You like just China and Russia?
And of course, the U.S.
It's like a new era of Arctic exploration and competition.
But this time it's driven by economics and geopolitics.
Not just the quest for discovery.
Right.
And Greenland is right in the middle of it all.
With its location and resources.
And a population that wants more autonomy.
Absolutely.
It's wild to think about how all these historical events have shaped the situation today.
Yeah, from the Norse settlements to the Cold War.
To Trump's purchase attempts.
It shows how history influences the present.
And when you add in climate change
And the demand for
and
resources,
shifting global power,
it creates a really unpredictable situation.
you know, when we started this deep dive into the U.S. proposals to buy Greenland, I thought it would be a pretty straightforward story.
Yeah, about real estate ambitions.
But it's turned out to be so much more than that.
It really has.
It's a story about global dynamics,
About identity
independence,
and the challenges of a changing world.
and it's a story that's still unfolding.
Yeah, the future of Greenland is full of possibilities.
It'll be interesting to see what happens.
Definitely.
So next time you look at a map and see Greenland,
Yeah.
remember that there's a whole world of history and politics going on there.
It's more complex than it seems.
It's a good reminder that the world is more interconnected than we realize.
That's a great takeaway.
It's been a fascinating deep dive.
I agree.
Thanks for joining us.
My pleasure.
We'll see you next time.
Sounds good.